floor on Sunny Die. It's just, yeah, they do. Yeah, bring your people up. And by the way, believe it or not, I have a meeting with the secretary, so I'm gonna allow the vice chair to take over, and you're in good hands with Dana Stein.
Okay, we can.
You can come on up. Hey. All right. Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Delegate Von Stewart. This is House Bill 11, the Private Well Safety Act. So veteran members of the committee will remember this bill with many fond memories. We passed it out of the House in a bipartisan fashion last year. Last year's bill was the work of a lot of stakeholder efforts over the 2021 interim. With the Maryland Department of the Environment, various nonprofit groups, with MACO, to try to all come together around a framework that we could agree on. We did manage to do that, and the bill did pass the House, and it did pass the formerly called ENT Committee. And then, sadly, it looked like it was going to sail through the Senate, but things got held up in the last few hours on the Senate floor, and it didn't quite make it. So we are back. For the benefit of the newer members, this bill relates to private wells. Around 830,000 Marylanders rely on private wells for their drinking water. And unfortunately, Maryland ranks in about the bottom 5 of states on the amount of regulations about our private wells. And this has a harmful effect for residents who live in communities where their wells could contain toxins. And the toxin that we're most concerned with is called nitrates, which if they seep into your well water and you drink them, they cause all sorts of bad things. Cancer, the most terrifying example is blue baby syndrome, which babies can be inflicted by and pass away if they drink well water that has been contaminated with nitrates. And so this bill essentially takes, it's in the identical form as last year, and takes essentially 3 swings at this problem. The first is a grant program for homeowners who wish to participate. We're not requiring anyone to do anything they don't want to do, but it's basically cash for homeowners to test their wells and to remediate any deficiencies to make sure that if they are toxins that they can fix them. Number 2, it directs the Maryland Department of the Environment to set up a well database so that we know when someone has a positive test for one of these toxins we're worried about, we've got a map across the state. We think this would be really helpful because if you have a private well, this would allow you to go on this database, it'd be searchable, and you could find whether some of your neighbors may have had a positive test for some sort of toxin we're worrying about, which could inform whether or not you should be testing more frequently or whether you should be concerned with the quality of your own well. And then finally, the bill imposes a requirement during the sale of a home. So the buyer would be responsible for the cost if they're selling a home with a private well to basically test at that point. That would give us kind of like a regular steady stream of testing. This is something that we worked with the realtors on and that they've come to the table with us on, and no longer have any issues with the bill. I don't think that there's any opposition to the bill, except I will note in conclusion that you may see an informational letter from MDE. They have some questions about the feasibility of them being able to pull off, particularly the database, with the existing resources they were budgeted in this fiscal year's budget. I'm sensitive to those concerns. I've already spoken with members. They've been actually, I have to say, in contrast to past years, a little bit more open to sort of proactively come and chat with me. I've talked to Tyler, and I've talked to other members of the administration about some of their concerns already, and I'm looking forward to working with them to making sure we can again pass this bill in a form that they can feel comfortable with and they can feel like it's doable with their existing resources. In conclusion, Mr. Vice Chair, I simply believe that every Marylander deserves clean and safe drinking water, and I urge a favorable vote on House Bill 11.
Thank you, Delegate. Caitlin?
Hi, everyone, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Caitlin Schmidt, and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst at the Center for Progressive Reform. This bill, House Bill 11, is a result of many discussions that took place in the summer and fall of 2021 of an informal work group made up of environmental and public health NGOs, county health directors, and staff from the Maryland Department of the Environment. This work group established 3 main goals. 1, safe drinking water for all. 2, financial assistance for residents to test and address contaminated drinking water from wells. And 3, enhanced public data on Maryland's groundwater and drinking water quality. Whereas public water is tested on a daily basis and maintained on a daily basis, the health importance of periodic testing for private wells is often overlooked by residents. The 830,000 Marylanders using private wells are at risk of unsafe drinking water with dire outcomes like blue baby syndrome and cancer. Annual testing at a minimum is the most cost-effective way to ensure ongoing water quality of a private well, and Maryland should join the 24 other states that offer low or no-cost test kits to residents. But testing isn't the only need. If testing reveals that the drinking water has been contaminated at unsafe levels, the cost of remediating a private well can really be cost prohibitive for many. Maryland can help ensure safe drinking water for all by joining the 13 other states that provide assistance to residents for contaminated well water. Lastly, at least 37 other states have databases with basic information related to private wells and well water quality, so Marylanders deserve access to this basic information. And I'll just quickly note, in response to a comment on page fiscal note 6, to be clear, all of the testing under House Bill 11 is intended to be conducted by private state-certified laboratories, not to be confused with the state laboratories within the Laboratories Administration. So we see no additional burden there. And I will conclude with, we urge a favorable report on House Bill 11.
Good timing. Number of other witnesses have signed up. A couple are virtual, but several signed up in person. So let me call the first 3: Emily Ranson, Bill Castelli, and Sarah Sample.
All right. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of House Bill 11. Pretty much, Caitlin hit everything. Public drinking water tested frequently. Wells are the responsibility of the homeowner, and many do not realize or understand their role. So super excited about this bill that helps people both access testing as well as access resources if they find out that there is a problem with their drinking water. So here in enthusiastic support of House Bill 11. Thanks.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you. Bill Castelli with Rifkin, Weiner, and Livingston on behalf of the Maryland Realtors today, and we're in support of the legislation too. And you have our written testimony, but just to highlight, we worked with the sponsor of the bill just on the House testing of the legislation at sale. There are currently tests that are being done, many for FHA and VA loan products, and we just wanted to make sure that what was set up in the legislation was kind of consistent with the way the federal government does it. So the bill does make that more uniform now, and for that reason, we're in support of the legislation.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you to the Vice Chair for having me today. Thank you to members of the committee. My name is Sarah Sample, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties, and we are here to support House Bill 11, also known as the Private Well Safety Act. And so essentially, as you've heard, this establishes a program at the Maryland Department of the Environment that will provide funds for lower income residents, adding the ability to inspect and repair their private wells. And so we know that a failing well, as we've heard, can be providing contaminated drinking water to a household and to a family. We've also heard that well upkeep and maintenance is incredibly expensive. So this program, if money was allocated to it, to the fund, this would provide really valuable resources to lower income residents. The other thing MACO would certainly applaud is the flexibility of the funding. One of the great things is that a county can apply for the funding on behalf of a resident if they maintain their eligibility. And the eligibility threshold for this is fairly low. I believe we've got to educate the public about the program. So information on the website, making phone calls to eligible households. So the county can apply on behalf of a resident. But if for some reason a county did not maintain their eligibility, then you have a resident who could apply for the funding themselves if they were able to prove their income threshold. So we think this is great. It provides resources to a really important cause, which is making sure that we have residents who have safe drinking water. So MACO would certainly urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 11, or House Bill 11. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call up Drew Schmidt-Perkins, Matt Geckel, and Annie Richards.
Let me go. Mine's easy. Thank you, members of Thank you, members of the committee. I have nothing else to add. Everybody stated support very well, just that we are in support of it also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Drew?
Me too.
Wow. I was going to say for Matt, short and sweet, but even more so. Yeah, Annie?
I'm going to be a little more long-winded. Good afternoon, committee members and Vice Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to present on testimony in favor of HB 11. My name is Annie Richards. I'm the Chester River Keeper with Shore Rivers on Maryland's eastern shore, a region dominated by agriculture, shallow water tables, and sandy soils. As River Keeper, I provide water quality information so that individuals and families can make informed decisions about recreating in their local waterways. The creation of a well water database will allow me to connect those same communities to information about the quality of their well water. This database could also aid organizations like Shore Rivers in our restoration efforts. Nitrate and ammonia pollution are consistently found in our lowest performing tributaries. However, point sources for this pollution are difficult to track. This new database could be another tool in our belt to track groundwater pollution and pinpoint land for restoration efforts. Personally, my husband and I recently purchased a home, and through that process, I was surprised to learn that well inspections are not required by the state nor by mortgage lenders. Requiring a well test during the sale of a home will afford more protection to new homeowners. A 2018 study by University of Maryland assessed well water quality in Cecil, Kent, and Queen Anne's counties, all of which are within Shore River's watersheds, and found nitrate contamination in 3% of wells tested. While contamination is a safety issue across the Eastern Shore and for all of Maryland, though many communities may not have the information or funds to protect themselves. Establishing a well safety fund will provide under-resourced communities with financial assistance to cover the costs associated with well testing and remediation when needed. In closing, HB 11 will provide credible data to communities, establish common sense requirements for well testing, and provide resources that help solve clean water inequities across Maryland. Thank you, and I hope to see a favorable report from this committee.
Thank you. We do have a couple of virtual witnesses, so we'll go to them and then take questions. So first, Courtney Bernhardt.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify remotely today. And I heartily support House Bill 11. My name is Courtney Bernhardt. I'm the Research Director at the Environmental Integrity Project. EIP is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that's dedicated to the effective enforcement of environmental laws. EIP has long advocated for better monitoring and transparent reporting so pollution can be identified and cleaned up. And this bill is great. Establishing and populating a database of online well information would be a huge step forward for public health. At a minimum, that database should include information like the well age, its location, its depth, the monitoring results, and sampling dates. It would be even more powerful if it helped users make sense of that monitoring data and inform them if concentrations of pollutants like nitrate or arsenic exceed safe levels. Not everyone knows what it means when test results show that they have 25 milligrams per liter of nitrate in their drinking water. So it's really important to put those results into context so people can make informed decisions. And as other witnesses have said, there are countless ways that this information would benefit public health and the environment. but it would also make the government more effective and efficient. So in closing, groundwater is one of Maryland's most precious resources, and it's worth the investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Gabrielle Ross.
Make sure everybody can hear me okay. All right. Hi, everybody, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to submit testimony in support of HB 11 on behalf of ASTE Coastal Trust, the Waterkeeper program for the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland. If enacted, HB 11 would be vital for the citizens of the Lower Eastern Shore. ASTE Coastal Trust is extremely concerned about the well water quality here on the shore. Most of our constituents are on well water or drink water from a well that is supplied by a municipality. The contaminants that are causing vast health concerns down here are often tasteless, colorless, and odorless. Currently, Maryland is ranked among the five states with the fewest protections regarding private wells. On the Eastern Shore, we are far behind the desperately needed infrastructure to protect people from contamination of their drinking water, as well as have had massive gaps in research and public awareness of those health impacts with drinking contaminated water. The time to act on this is now. We know that cancer statistics for the Lower Eastern Shore are some of the highest in the state. In 2020, a study was published from the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health that found on the Lower Eastern Shore, cancer patients were far more likely to live in homes supplied by private well compared to individuals in the general region population. And according to the SEER database, Wycomico, Worcester, and Somerset counties have some of the highest rates of lung cancer, colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and melanoma in the state. Given the high prevalence of several cancer types and potential for groundwater contamination, the popularity of private well use in this rural region, evaluating the relationship between cancer diagnosis and water source on the Lower Shore bears serious consideration. The Private Well Safety Act will provide roughly 830,000 Marylanders who get their drinking water from a private well with the necessary resources and information to monitor and safeguard their household, ultimately protecting their family's health. We urge a favorable reform.
Thank you. Next, Sophie Loeb.
My name is Sophie Loeb, and I'm the Climate Justice Policy Fellow at the Center for Progressive Reform here in support of House Bill 11. Last year, Maryland took a critical step to protect private well owners with the passage of House Bill 1069. However, well owners still lacked critical information and resources to adequately safeguard their drinking water. The lack of protections in Maryland is not only outdated, but it may also harm public health. In 2020, we assessed nitrate, a colorless, odorless, and tasteless contaminant in private wells on the Lower Eastern Shore. Excess manure and fertilizer application and septic system drainage are common sources of nitrate. We found that 1 in 25 wells tested had nitrate levels above EPA's safe drinking water threshold. MDE's own research confirmed this. According to the department's 2021 Groundwater Protection Program report, an in-house study of public water supplies with elevated nitrate in 3 Eastern Shore counties highlighted the correlation between proximity of farming practices to drinking water wells. High nitrate levels are known to cause blue baby syndrome, a condition fatal to infants, and are linked to an increased risk of cancer, pregnancy complications, and thyroid disease at levels well below EPA's threshold. A recent peer-reviewed study found an association between well water usage and cancer rates on the Lower Shore. In 2021, we launched a community science initiative whereby free nitrate test strips were sent to private well owners on the Lower Shore. 81% of participants reported never having tested their wells or doing so only once. Similar to our 2020 findings, 5% of samples exceeded EPA's threshold. In a follow-up survey, more than a third of participants said that costs of test and/or remediation were barriers to testing. Furthermore, 98% of respondents said they would support efforts by the state to subsidize the cost of test kits, and 87% of respondents said they would support efforts by the state to provide grants to clean up contaminated wells. We urge the legislature to take a step forward in ensuring that safe drinking water is a right for all Marylanders by creating a private well safety program. We urge the committee to adopt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have a number of questions. First question goes to Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Delegate Stewart. First off, thank you again for your bill. I voted for it last year, the previous year, and a year before that, and I intend to vote for it this year. and I also intend to put my name on there as a co-sponsor. I do have a question. Last week, it was reported that several wells in Montgomery County tested for PFAS. It was also strongly suggested that that chemical came into those wells from fertilizer that came directly from the Blue Plains treatment plant. Obviously, there's some discussion going back and forth. As I looked at your bill on page number 8, I think it is, page number 8, it does suggest several types of chemicals to be tested for. It does not use PFAS as a particular example. However, my question is, item number 5 says all volatile organic compounds for which there is a maximum contaminant level. We do have maximum contaminant levels for PFAS, but I don't know if that falls into the category of a volatile organic compound.
So to answer your question, Delegate Holmes, the bill defines contamination as a substance that is present that exceeds the legal threshold limit on the amount of the substance that is allowed in a public water system under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, you go ahead.
The MCLs established right now actually do not cover PFAS. However, the second part of that definition says that the department finds a harmful level of another contaminant as determined by the department. So we're essentially allowing leeway for the department to cover contaminants like PFAS that are currently not listed under the MCL.
Okay, and that just came out last week, so keep track of that if you don't mind, Delegate Stewart.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question, and of course, you can call me Vaughn whenever you like.
You got it, Vaughn. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Next is Delegate Guyton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you. This is a friendly question, but I'm trying to understand. I'm sure I voted for this last year, but I wasn't on this committee to really know the ins and outs. So I have a feeling I'm going to be asking this about a lot of your bills, so forgive me, doesn't mean a lack of support. How are we paying for this grant?
Yeah, it's a good question. So right now, it's essentially an unfunded mandate. So the grant program itself, the financial assistance to homeowners, does not have any money in it. So the fiscal note sort of, I think, projects what they think it would cost to sort of do this kind of program, but there's no money in there. So obviously, we're hoping that we could find something. I mean, as Caitlin mentioned, a number of other states provide these sort of financial assistance programs. I think the one that we've used in the past is kind of like a good example is Wisconsin, because they have a heralded financial assistance program, and it's also about a state that's around the same size as Maryland, and they spend about $2 million a year on their financial assistance program. So it's not an insignificant amount of money, certainly, but it's also not necessarily going to be an astronomical amount. I think it's a small price to pay for us to ensure that this huge swath of the state has safe access to drinking water.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think it's a great idea. May I ask another question? Thank you. I'm getting into the rhythm of this committee now.
You're doing great.
More
You're doing
than
great.
one's okay. My question to you also is, did you consider expanding it? Because I know I have a well at my home, and I don't think it's been tested in 8 years, right? And now I'm
go on
really
Amazon.
worried.
Go on Amazon. There's like $22. You can get one now.
So I am. I'm actually online right now.
Okay,
right?
good, okay.
I didn't go to Amazon.
Oh, okay.
But I went to how do I get my water tested for my private well
There
in
we go.
Maryland, and I'm finding tests that start at $200 and go up to $799 for a variety of things. And my feeling is that a lot of them are going to try to sell me systems or something like that. So one thing that I would hope, I know we're not changing this bill because it's going to pass right through, but one thing I would hope maybe to consider for future legislation or this year, if there's an appropriate vehicle, is how to educate people like me who don't know that I could be drinking contaminated water, and also maybe regulate or give more information about how to find reliable testing sources that aren't going to charge $800 for something I might be able to get for $20 on Amazon. That's a big concern to me right now, looking at these prices. So
Yeah, no, that's a great
Thank
question.
you.
Do you want to talk about the education component?
Sure, yeah. So the bill does require as a component of working the private well safety program for both MDE and any county that wants to participate in the program, to also educate folks about the program and the need for annual testing in terms of health impacts, and really, relaying the importance of testing on a regular and annual basis, as groundwater quality can change over time. And to answer sort of your second question, MDE does have a list of state-approved certified laboratories that you can go to for testing, for basic tests, for instance, for a certificate of potability that does your basic parameters that you want to do every single year. Those run the gamut of around $79. So that's typically, with a state certified lab, you won't be seeing a more expensive test than that.
We're still on the horror that is waste, that is this bill. No, I'm sorry, what bill are we on?
Well water,
well.
and yes, we still are on this horror after 3 or 4 years.
Oh, my God. All right, next question goes to Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had just a couple of quick questions. One is, if you find something, do you have to remediate? Does this bill require that?
No.
Okay.
No, we'd hope that people would, obviously, and we'd
Right.
hopefully, giving them some cash, we would hope would make a difference in their decision to remediate. But certainly, if someone found a toxin in their well and they wanted to just go on, keep on keeping on, then this bill doesn't change that reality.
Because there is a discussion about nitrates. There are people who feel if you're not a baby, you're fine. But,
Right.
At different levels. But the other question I had is, it says remediation includes the drilling of a new well and connection to a public water supply. So I represent a rural area where the public water supply is not a thing. But there are other things you can do to wells that would be possibly much cheaper than drilling a new well.
Yeah.
So would this also provide money for?
Yes. Drilling a new well would be sort of like, I think the last step, but you may have a...
So I would say that this bill certainly encourages permanent solutions, whereas sort of, for instance, an on-site treatment system, which can remedy the problem, does require ongoing maintenance and sort of changing the filters every 6 months and things like that. So in our conversations with Wisconsin, they actually take the sort of the temporary fix out of the picture and just focus on, let's drill a new well or find a more permanent solution. I would say that we're certainly open to, ongoing treatment as well as being added to the bill. But right now, sort of, I think we left it as just sort of more permanent solutions, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, I'm sorry I didn't hear your introduction to the bill, but apparently
it's totally fine.
I thank you for protecting the citizens of the Lower Eastern Shore, that they had a big interest in this. And I'm on well system myself.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm plagued with iron in the aquifer. And that's the biggest thing we have to do. And we have to have a conditioning system and protect it, or I'll turn orange. But
Yeah.
But I do appreciate you bringing the bill forward, and it sounds like it's an incentive-based program to have well water tested, and I'm probably encouraged with that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, and I think that it is important to realize we're not imposing any new requirements or mandate on people on the lower shore or anywhere else where, wells are especially common. It's just literally some cash if folks want to test their wells frequently and they want to remediate if they have an issue. We're hoping that, ultimately the state will decide to fund this so that your neighbors and then all of our neighbors, Delegate Ziegler's neighbors, everyone who relies on well water in the state, can be able to afford to do this.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, I've noticed that the individuals who are afraid of the United Nations 2030 agenda have not signed up in opposition to your bill.
They may have wells.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll benefit. And this is actually, one of my few bills that I did not ask the UN Secretary General to write for me.
Okay, great. Somewhere in there's an Eleanor Roosevelt joke, but I don't know. Okay, Delegate Noraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Stewart, just a question. The district that I represent has folks that are on wells that are in multi-housing units, in apartment complexes or in condominiums. Does this bill have any impact on those types of housing?
Yes, absolutely. So because we'd be working under the bill, as you heard from Mako, with counties directly, and they could apply for the funding on behalf of their residents, if there was sort of a multi-family facility that was relying on well water collectively, we think it would be much easier for the county to come in and say, hey, let's get some money for this entire building collectively, rather than have each individual homeowner apply for some sort of portion of a larger system. But yes, the answer to that is absolutely.
Thank you, Delegate.
Yep. Amen, Mr. Chairman.
Go now to House Bill 30, Delegate Stein. Yes, you may. You can start whenever, and you got 4 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. For the record, Delegate Dana Stein. And this bill deals with another one of the committee's favorite topics, septics. So, and is a follow on to last year's House Bill 318, which established a professional licensing board for the septic industry. And as you recall, the bill's purpose was to bring standards and accountability for the septic industry by creating a board that would oversee licensing procedures for individuals in the industry. Now, since the bill passed, MDE, which is responsible for implementation of the bill, identified a number of pretty much technical fixes that were needed to the bill, and this bill makes those changes. And I do want to thank MDE for recommending those changes and for their support of the bill. I'll just quickly go through the changes.
I'd like to thank MDE for writing a letter on a bill. That's kind of a
Yes.
refreshing change.
Yes. And I'll quickly go through them. Fellow panelists can amplify on them. First change relates to the property transfer inspection license, which was created under prior legislation. Makes clear that that's only required when someone is doing an inspection of a septic system for the purpose of property transfer. I guess there was some ambiguity on that issue, so we clarify that. Another change makes clear the license application fees paid by folks who are to be licensed under the bill are paid into the fund established under the bill from last year, the On-Site Wastewater Professionals Fund. Now, the fix clarifies the fund into which any penalties will be paid. This one I'll defer maybe to Drew to explain in more detail, but to make the numbers work out for total board membership, we reduced the number of professional on-site members from 6 to 5. And also, speaking of the composition of the board, we did, in last year's bill, have a geographic requirement that members be representative of all geographic regions of the state. We were advised that to provide a little bit more flexibility in terms of finding folks to serve on this board, that we change it to be representative of all geographic regions of the state. And last, the bill is an emergency bill so that MDE can meet the June 1st, 2023 deadline for setting up the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I can go next. Chairman Barve, members of the committee, I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of these technical changes to this bill to make something that we passed last year work. So thank you, and we urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Chairman Barbe, members of the committee. I'm Matt Geckel with Back River Precast, testifying in favor of HB 30 as written with no amendments. This bill is to fix some technical problems that came up when implementing this bill. We do see that there is an amendment by the professional engineers to exempt themselves. We don't feel the professional engineers should be exempt. Just because they are a professional engineer does not mean that they have the qualifications to design a septic system. You can become a PE by just taking a test on fire protection. It has nothing to do with designing a septic system. It's only $150. Whatever the board decides to put down as a requirement that you test your knowledge, they should have no problem with it. They're able to do it. I personally have taught most of the people in the state of Maryland how to do O&Ms, and yet I still have to get certified, and I don't have a problem with that. It's $150. I'll take any test they got. Testifying in favor. Thank you very much.
Drew Schmidt-Perkins, representing Back River Precast and also Team Septics, the unholy alliance of people working to improve the septic industry as a whole. Also in support of this bill, I want to talk a little bit about the amendment. I really appreciate Chris Costello bringing this amendment to us ahead of time so that we could discuss it amongst Team Septics about whether or not professional engineers should be exempted. And it's clear that they should not. Anybody who's designing a septic system in Maryland should regularly get certified, be trained on up-to-date information about septic design and the changes in weather, changes in knowledge, so that we have the best systems going in the state. Because as you've heard, bad design systems can contaminate the very drinking water that we just discussed in the last bill. So we urge a favorable report with no amendments.
Hold on. Okay, we've got a, we have a virtual individual who signed up favorable, and then I'm going to hear from Chris Costello, and then we'll go to questions for any one of the group of you. And so let's welcome to the committee Edward Harrison, who is virtual. Sir, welcome. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Eddie Harrison. I am a legislative liaison for Maryland On-Site Wastewater Professional Association, or MALPA. I'm testifying in support of HB 30 with no amendments. MALPA was in discussions with Team Septic and the Maryland Department of Environment over the summer and came up with the agreement with all parties that these changes were needed. I will refer to my written testimony on those details, and everybody else already mentioned them. MALPA has become aware of an amendment that has been proposed by the Maryland Society of Professional Engineers. This is an errors and omission bill, not a bill to alter the intent of the previous legislation. Adding this amendment will definitely alter the intent of the previous legislation. The licensing bill was proposed for 4 years before it passed out of the legislation. The Maryland Society of Professional Engineers had those 4 years to weigh in on any issues they may have had. The on-site industry has been plagued with poor designs coming from licensed designers of other licensing boards, not just PEs. Regulators from state and county agencies have been our most vocal within our organization on the lack of education that professional designers display in their on-site wastewater system. The purpose of including all licensed designers is to become certified through this board was to bring all designers up to today's science and technology on on-site wastewater. On-site wastewater is not the same as municipal or small wastewater treatment facilities. Municipal plants and other large-scale treatment facilities utilize aggressive treatment practices, where on-site systems utilize passive and natural processes to process the wastewater and dispersal effluent. There is no requirement for this professional engineer or any other licensed designer become licensed under this board. Currently, until the board's formed and operating, all they need to do is pay $150 registration. Once the on-site wastewater is fully formed and has been and written regulations, they will have to fulfill any other. I urge favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, why don't you come up and describe to us your amendment, and then I will go to questions for all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Costello. I'm up here representing the Maryland Society of Professional Engineers, and we regret to have to come up here and offer an amendment because obviously people would rather we didn't. But this bill is intended to correct shortcomings in the previous legislation, and we see a particular shortcoming, and that is that it is the intent of the Department of the Environment to use this legislation to include licensing of professional engineers who are, as you can see from our written testimony, are already licensed by the Board of Professional Engineers. And they are, I think, more than qualified to do this work with the licenses that they have, and they already pay a license fee, and their firms pay a permit already. They are already licensed and permitted and educated enough to put in entire sewage treatment plants without a license from the Department of the Environment. They put in stormwater treatment, which is quite often more complex than some of these sewage treatment systems that we're talking about, and they're not required to have a special license. And now, I think the concern here that Ms. Drew Schmidt-Perkins is talking about is that they want to make sure that they're doing this correctly, and they should do it correctly, and they would do it correctly. And if they want this to be something where the engineers are going to coordinate this with them, they certainly would. And you can see from all of the correspondence that leads up to this, I was looking through it all, there was never an attempt to actually coordinate or communicate with the engineering community throughout this whole process. And that's why we were so surprised at the very last minute that this was all of a sudden being imposed on us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just asking a question. I'm not trying to give anyone any indication on where I am on this one way or the other. Just asking a question to Mr. Costello. In the process of the PE, there is the EIT first step. Is that correct? EIT exam, first step.
An EIP?
Engineering and training exam.
Oh, yes.
And
engineering and training, yes.
And then after that, you take several years of.
Oh, yes.
Several years of on-site.
Right.
Actual training to become a PE. In the profession of professional engineers, do they design septic systems, or have they been designing septic systems for
They
many?
do. They do.
Okay. All right.
And usually they will not design something or attempt to do something that they don't have the technical knowledge to do. They won't come in and do something they don't know how to do. That's something that engineers.
And I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to persuade or dissuade. I'm just putting information out there for information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just follow up on the question. I appreciate Mr. Costello's comments, but I do want to say this bill had been before for committee members who've been on this committee for several years, before this committee for 4 years. On-site wastewater services, as defined in the original bill as passed, means any activity associated with, among other things, the design of an on-site wastewater system. So clearly, our intent was to cover and require licensing of folks who are going to be designing septic systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman here, your Back River?
Yes.
You design these, or are you a professional engineer?
I am not a professional engineer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go now to the last. Thank you all. been asked by Trish to make this announcement, and legal counsel announced that Friday hearings will start February 17th. So mark your calendars. Friday, February 17th will be our first Friday public hearing date. And so before we put you on the timer and start timing you, what happened to the bill last year?
Well, sure, I'll take the free time. You passed the bill, this committee, those of you who are returning, passed the bill 2 years ago. The bill had a sunset with a report coming back from the Food System Resiliency Council to tell us if we should keep it, if we should change it, and where it should go in state law. And so their report suggested that we should keep it. It should go in MDEM.
No, what I was really hoping to find out is what happened when it went over to the Senate.
Oh, it passed.
Oh, it passed.
No, this bill passed both the House and the Senate, and
Oh.
it created the Food System Resiliency
Got
Council.
it, okay. In that case, all right. For some reason, I thought it failed, and I just wanted you to tell us that it died in the Senate, and then we can go.
I'm happy to list all the other really good bills y'all have passed that have died in the Senate. Do you want me to do that now?
No, that's
or
all
should
right. Start the timer, 4 minutes, go.
Okay, so now that half my testimony's done. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, for the record, Delegate Lori Charkoudian here requesting a favorable report on House Bill 32. So to review my preview, the Food System Resiliency Council, this committee passed it and the Senate did pass it in 2021. And the idea behind a Food System Council is it takes all of the different aspects of food and how we grow it and how we serve it and how we address it affects our environment. As you know, it affects our local economy. As you know, it affects our agricultural preservation, it affects our health. And of course, it affects food security and whether or not people have food to eat. And in the context of COVID, what we got to see is how much crisis emergency preparedness is tied to our food system. And so what we did in 2021 is we said, because most of these areas are siloed in how we consider our policies, we have the Department of Environment, we have the Department of Health, we have the Department of Human Services, and really we need to think about our food systems in a more integrated way. What other states have done is they have had food system resiliency councils that think about and plan in an integrated way. And because we were in the middle of a major crisis, and frankly we're still in that crisis, especially for people who are suffering from food insecurity, we decided to put it in the Emergency Management Department. So we put it in the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. We weren't positive that was the right place, although we suspected it was. So the way that we wrote the bill was, after 2 years, the Food Council, in addition to all the other good work that it's done, and my panel can tell you about the good work that it's done, that they would come back to us and say, do we need this on a continuing basis, and if so, where does it belong? So the report, which you have access to, it might have been linked in I think it's linked in my testimony. It's 72 pages, but I'll give you the highlight. It said we should keep the Food Council, we should put it in MDEM. And because since then, MDEM also has created the Office of Resilience, it was decided that that's actually the strongest place for the Food Council, because it's already looking at resilience, and the Office of Resilience is looking at the integrated way that many of these issues, food in this case, need to be planned for, and policies need to be considered together. So the bill is a pretty simple bill. It extends permanently and it puts in MDEM, and then it just changes a couple of the election of the co-chairs, those kinds of things that if folks have questions about, I'm happy to answer. And with that, I'll pass it back to you or to my panel.
Who would like to go next? We'll take the in-person first.
You can go. I'll go first. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Michelle Caruso, and I'm here representing the Montgomery County Food Council. We're an independent nonprofit and the largest local food council in Maryland. We convene over 2,000 partners around food system issues each year. We submitted written testimony in support of this legislation, and I just want to briefly mention a few points today. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted existing food system inefficiencies and inequities across the state, food insecurity, supply chain issues, and the impact of our food system on the climate exist in both blue sky times as well as emergencies. The Food System Resiliency Council creates coordination and communication pathways that increase our resilience and ability to react during future emergencies, while also improving our food system today. As a local organization, we feel it is important for coordination at the state level to ensure all constituent voices are engaged in policymaking and resource allocation. When we silo these efforts in individual communities, we miss out on regional infrastructure, network building, and federal funding opportunities that are actively happening elsewhere in the United States. We want Maryland to be a leader in these efforts and not fall behind. We've also found that the Food System Resiliency Council has served as a catalyst for improved partnerships with other local jurisdictions on shared priorities, resulting in federal funding that likely would not have been possible without its existence. The Food System Resiliency Council provides expert academic, government, and community leadership to improve the resilience of our food system, and we feel it should continue as proposed in this legislation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Yes, my name is Michael J. Wilson. I am the director of Maryland Hunger Solutions, a statewide organization working to end hunger in the state of Maryland. I am also a member of the Food System Resilience Council, and I'm here as well to ask for a favorable report. My colleagues have done a great job of describing the work of the council and the success that it's had. I've submitted written testimony, and I'm going to focus on one of the kind of victories, the kind of things that we've worked on that have been really helpful. If you think about the farmers markets in Maryland, where farmers come to sell their products, where suburban families come to buy food, and because of Maryland market money, low-income folks can also spend their SNAP and WIC dollars at the farmers markets. This is an excellent example of how Maryland comes together, rural, urban, and suburban, and the council's work to help encourage these kinds of activities is critical for every part of our state. And so we look for a favorable report, and thank you for your time.
Okay, we have two witnesses who are virtual. Anna Sierra, who I think who is next. Anna, if you'd like to join us. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee. For the record, I am Anna Sierra. I'm the Chief Development Officer and Legislative Liaison for the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. I'm also the senior staff assigned to support the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. I know it's been a long day, and I have submitted written testimony on behalf of the department. So this afternoon, I will simply say that the department supports House Bill 32 and its formal assignment of the Food System Resiliency Council under MDEM's new Office of Resilience. We believe the mission of the council aligns very well with the office's statutory responsibilities. We appreciate the committee's consideration of House Bill 32 and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Sydney Daigle. I believe I got your name correct. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sydney Daigle. I serve as the director of the Prince George's County Food Equity Council. We're a county-level food policy council for Prince George's, and I'm also a former co-chair of the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. I think ditto to everything that my partners and colleagues have said so far. The only thing I would additionally like to point out is that the challenges that we saw in Prince George's for our food system during the pandemic, the massive disruptions that caused spikes in food insecurity, the interruptions to our farmers and their businesses and our restaurateurs and their profits were things that we saw across the state of Maryland. And these are issues that affected Marylanders, from Western Maryland to the Eastern Shore, to the Capital Region, to Southern Maryland in different ways, but we were all affected. And I think the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council provided what I very much felt like was a lifeline for those of us working on food systems issues. It showed us how to tackle challenges that we shared in different ways, and it brought multi-sectoral collaborative partnerships to tackle problems that aren't simple and really need those approaches to be effective. So we just need, we need more time to really see the efforts of this council come to fruition and to see its enormous potential realized. And this is exactly what this bill gives us. It gives us the time to do that really challenging work collaboratively so that we can have effective solutions to solve our food system's challenges. That's it. Thank you. I urge a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Delegate Jacobs has a question.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good.
All right.
So I'm looking at, it's kind of not entirely relevant, but I'm looking at all the membership. I don't see anybody from the seafood industry there in any of this food resiliency council,
Seafood.
unless I've missed something.
Yep, did you want to speak to that?
So I think the council as it exists tries to cover as much of the food and agriculture world as possible. We don't have every part. We don't have, we don't have a restaurant representing them. We don't have seafood industry. We don't have lots of other parts of the system. But I think what we've tried to do is to be open to having those conversations. We've been visiting with folks around the state and having them submit testimony. We can't successfully do this without their input. And so we would love to have the input from folks in the seafood industry as well as we think about this. That's clearly a part of our system.
And if I could just add, there is the ability for the secretary of MDEM to appoint other individuals that they deem appropriate. So we had a few others who asked about being added statutorily, and when I spoke to the secretary about that, I think, although Anna might be able to speak on behalf of the department, the concern about having a statutory definition that has too many people becomes either unwieldy or to get quorums or, becomes problematic if you can't fill the positions. But I think the secretary and the commitment on the department is for that inclusion. And so if there was somebody who was interested in that position, I suspect that they could make that request and be on the council. Beyond the council, there's also, the council has, in statute, there's a couple of different, there's the ability to create subcommittees, and the council has 2 or 3 subcommittees. And on the subcommittees, there's several more people. So there's like 50 or 75 people then who are involved in the subcommittees, even beyond the council itself. So I think there's lots of opportunities to connect. And so if there's somebody who might be interested, I would suggest, and if Anna's still on, I can't see her anymore, but I would suggest reaching out to MDEM about that.
Anna is there. Anna, would you like to answer that question?
Certainly, I think the delegate covered it very well from our position. I will also mention, we actually do have a restaurant, and it is, in fact, largely a seafood restaurant from Talbot County. Headwaters Grill is represents the food business sector on the council. We also have Mark Powell assigned from the Maryland Department of Agriculture. I understand that's a government representative, but he's the Chief of Agriculture and Seafood Marketing, and so he speaks a lot on behalf of the seafood industry and represents lots of their concerns to the council.
And I appreciate that, but you probably, it's early in the session, but you may or may not have heard me touch on this in proliferation of blue catfish in the bay, and it's a good food source. It really is, and we've really got to figure out how to process and move more of it through food resiliency or creating a sub-council. Perhaps there may be some legislation reflecting that. You never know. But it's something to be really considering it seriously because of the snakeheads, the blue cats, these invasive species, but very good source of food. And the state really needs to take an active role in trying to help market this stuff, get it out there where we can get rid of it, so to speak.
Since the chairman has approved of me talking about all kinds of other bills besides the one in front of us, I'll just take this opportunity to mention that I actually have a bill coming that adds invasive species, so blue catfish and snakehead and other invasive species, to the 20% procurement goal for state institutions. And so that's coming, and I look forward to your support on that. But that particular approach of the state institutions procuring more local food, including soon-to-be blue catfish, is part of the kinds of things that this council has put together. So I think I'm saying yes, and I've got something coming, sounds like you do too, and I look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you very much.
Before I recognize, Delegate Otto turned off his button. Do you not want to ask a question? So I'll ask a question. Would it be horrible to include seafood?
I mean, personally, I don't think it would be horrible. I think the question that I would have for MDEM is, you know, how they feel about the size of the council. And if there's others who then would ask to be put on, and if they would feel like, in terms of getting quorum, those kinds of issues, if it would be a challenge. So
Okay.
I personally don't have a problem with it. I hate to punt to you, or maybe I don't, Anna. But if we feel like we, you know, like the size is okay, then we could put that together.
Because we always try to not be horrible.
I do. It's my goal as well. It's a good low bar.
I've never thought of you as horrible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anna, do you want to add your 2 cents before we conclude this?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. The only thing I would say is, as we've covered, the secretary can add at will, and the council is actually in the process of developing bylaws to address exactly this. We have had multiple groups, multiple industries approach with interest in being appointed to the council, and to ensure that it remains an effective body of a group that we can both meet Open Meetings Act requirements and quorum requirements. We would ask the committee's consideration that we be able to develop those bylaws and come up with a process as council for considering the appointment of new membership.
Perfect. Delegate Boyce.
I think I just read my own answer. And this, I'm sorry, this office also helps work on food waste. Yes. Okay. I thought I read that. Okay. Thank you. That's all I wanted. Thanks.
Okay. In my ongoing quest to give more work to land use, I think that's where the bill's going to go. Try and keep it busy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
We'll make you learn to regret that. Okay, well, thank you very much, Delegate Charkoudian. You are free to go. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 32, I'm pretty sure. And once again, we have a couple of people here who signed up against not testifying. It's the people, it's the United Nations folks, yeah. Okay, yeah, boy. God, I wonder what irked them in this case. Okay, so that ends the public hearing for this afternoon. Our leadership group is not going to meet this Wednesday. Announcements.